to pull the deck up.
No worries. There we are. We right to press record?
Yep, all done.
Great. Well, hello everybody. I'm Deborah Young, the CEO of the RegTech Association, and I'd like to start this afternoon or this morning's meeting, wherever you are in the world, with an acknowledgement of the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting today. And in my case, that is the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and also welcome any of our Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander friends that are here with us today. And a big warm welcome to all of you. I thought I'd start by giving us a little bit of a feeling for the audience that we've had over the last little while, and also who we've got on the line today. Since the 17th of March, we've had to pivot our entire offering online, as many of you will know. And in doing so, we've entertained 2,200 people from 32 countries. And I can tell you, if somebody had said that to me this time last year, I would not have believed that was possible. So for some perspective, before we get on with our discussion today, I thought it might be interesting for those of you who are on the line to know that we took registrations today from 15 different countries, and there are representatives here from government, export agencies, regulators, regulated entities, including banks. We've got payment platform providers. We have industry associations, members of the media, chambers for business commerce, investors, law firms, consumer groups, consulting firms, and of course our RegTech firms from all over the world. So I'd like to really give you all a warm welcome. Next slide, please, Al. I just wanted to spend a really short amount of time on this slide. This is the RegTech Association's 4 strategic imperatives. And you can kind of see that there are no real surprises here on what you see and where we'll be focused on for the next 2 years. But the one that we're going to explore in a bit more detail today is, and we're placing a lot of importance around the exploration and expansion of markets and export opportunities. We commenced this program called RegTech Open for Business to send very clear messages to everyone that RegTech globally is definitely open for business, and why now during this pandemic it's more important than ever. We also want to use the opportunity that we have today to talk about RegTech with not only a financial services lens, but also point to the growing number of sector agnostic RegTech solutions that are coming online. And we are talking to those firms, and those firms are joining the association almost every day now. In particular today, before we kick off, I would like to acknowledge Austrade for supporting this event, and also nod to the Nordic RegTech Association, RegTech Associates from London, and Certainty Compliance for their support. There's just a few housekeeping things that I'd like to go over before we get started, if that's okay. If I can ask everybody bar the person that is speaking to be on mute, that would be great. We are going to encourage you to ask questions later in the program, and we'll do that via the chat function. And if you could actually identify yourself, your name and your organisation when you put your question up, that will help our moderator be able to put that question into a bit of context. And we'll do our best to get to everyone. We do record this event, and it's made available following this for everyone. And finally, I just wanted to say that right at the end of the program today, we've decided to do something a little bit different. We had some feedback that it'd be really nice if there was a bit of networking. So what we're going to trial today for the first time is right at the end of the program, I'm going to stay on the line for about 10 minutes. So if anybody would like to stay on the line and have a chat, you can do that then. So it is now my very great pleasure to introduce our next speaker. I'd like to introduce Jennifer Mackinlay, who's the Senior Trade and Investment Commissioner for the UK, Ireland and the Nordics from Austrade, and she's going to open proceedings for us today. Jennifer was formerly posted to Paris, where she was the Senior Trade and Investment Commissioner for France, Spain, Portugal, Belgium and Luxembourg from 2015 to 2019. She lived in France for almost 20 years and she has a deep knowledge of European markets and doing business in Europe. Jennifer also leads defence, advanced manufacturing and the space sector for Europe within Austrade. And prior to joining Austrade in 2015, Jennifer worked as a lawyer for Clifford Chance in Paris for 15 years, specialising in M&A and private equity. From 2010 to 2015, Jennifer was their Director for Client Development, Marketing and Communications with responsibility for France, Turkey and Africa. Very warm welcome to you, Jennifer. Thank you so much for making time to be with us today.
Oh, look, Deborah, the pleasure is mine, and thank you so much for this warm welcome. And thank you to the RegTech Association for the opportunity to participate today with my colleague, Chris Cobb. First of all, I'd like to give the RegTech Association an enormous shout out for the fantastic work that you've been doing in promoting the sector and the opportunities, none more so than during this very challenging period of COVID, where you've been assisting companies and many members of the ecosystem to traverse what is just such a dreadful crisis. But on a positive note, Austrade sees the opportunity to engage with the RegTech sector as a huge opportunity, because the RegTech sector has the opportunity and the potential to contribute greatly to Australia's prosperity and what is already a well-regarded regulatory environment. As we all know, RegTech is far-reaching, and whilst one of the most recent foci has been FinTech, it's much more than that. It traverses, it's transversal and crosses so many sectors. It's an enabler that solves regulation and compliance challenges and can really be applied to any regulated industry or vertical. And so it's for this reason that it can contribute to the efficiency, improved productivity, increased safety and confidence, transparency and attractiveness of many of Australia's key sectors. And in doing so, it's really going to add to what is already a very compelling business case for Australia. Many of you will be aware that the Boston Consulting Group report from 2017 noted that Australia had the third highest concentration of RegTech firms in the world, so just behind the US and the UK. And what's interesting is that most of Australia's RegTechs are actually founded by people with significant corporate experience and who've sought to solve problems that they've encountered themselves in their own professions. So at Austrade, we're actually seeing a growing volume of RegTech companies that are looking at Australia as a priority market, and Australian companies also that are looking to take their solutions to the world. So it's a really exciting period. I just thought I'd quickly touch on the role of Austrade for those people in our audience today who mightn't be familiar with what we do. On the one hand, Austrade seeks to attract, promote and facilitate productive foreign direct investment into Australia. So we have teams based in Australia, here in London and Stockholm and across Europe and the rest of the world. And these teams are assisting potential investors with their investment plans. They're helping them navigate the local system, make introductions, provide information about setting up, information about the local regulatory system, and encouraging them to talk to associations like the RegTech Association, for example. We have worked with a number of UK and Nordic RegTech companies over the last year, and some of them have set up recently or are in the process of doing so. And what's interesting is when you ask them about what was the feature and the compelling business case that Australia offered, they cite the stability of the Australian market, the well-regulated environment, the fact that there is a higher emphasis on regulatory compliance after the Hayne Royal Commission, and regulators who work constructively with the sector. Then a few other factors are also that there's a dynamic startup scene in the B2B industry, and investors are also seeking to tap into a very strong talent pool in Australia. I'd also note that Australia's proximity to Asia is really interesting for investors as well, because they can hone in on some of the Asian language skills that some of our young talent has, and use Australia as a hub to export to Asia and access those markets. I thought it could be interesting just to touch quickly on two examples which are really fabulous. The example of TCC Group, Record Shore, I think they're on line this morning or this evening for our Australian viewers. So TCC Group, they believe that culture and conduct are the drivers of success in financial services. This company has spent 20 years helping UK-based firms to manage conduct risk and improve customer outcomes. So now they're leading the charge in Australia, empowering their clients with smart tech-enabled solutions to tackle the issues that were raised in particular by the Royal Commission. TCC is now bringing their regulatory expertise to Australian financial services firms, which were already benefiting from Record Shore's revolutionary voice and document analytics solutions. So Record Shore is enabling firms to vastly improve their systems and controls whilst delivering powerful insights, which cut traditional review times in half, whilst enabling more consistent and quality customer outcomes across both remediation and business as usual deployments. Then the second example I wanted to refer to is FeatureSpace. FeatureSpace is a UK RegTech business that provides adaptive behavioural analytics to reduce fraud and prevent financial crime. And I think this is something that we can all really relate to. It's really quite tangible because we've seen so many issues come up for banks trying to defend themselves from this kind of financial crime. And so what this company is doing is providing a new form of model that means there's no manual retuning necessary, and it can recognise anomalies and feed back into the system. So these solutions that are being provided to financial institutions and very soon in Australia are really, really fantastic for the local ecosystem. And we've all seen, I think, that there've been increased number of scams during COVID. So this kind of product is really going to be helpful going forward. Then just a quick word about the trade activities in which we're involved. We also assist Australian exporters to export abroad and expand their overseas footprint. And just in the last 2 years, we've facilitated 2 delegations of Australian tech companies, including multiple RegTech companies. Firstly, one of the delegations went to Paris and then on to London. And then this year, another one came to Europe and then finished off in London. And I was really glad to see Michelle East, whom I met originally when I was based in Paris, who joins us today, and have the opportunity to continue the conversation with her. Excuse me, my French is coming in. The European partners, I should say, have been really impressed with the quality of the Australian cohort. Australian RegTech companies, they often look to the UK when they're first setting out to look at Europe and to export their solutions. And it has to be said that they're really regarded as smart in the regulatory space. We're seeing RegTech companies whose solutions are in a broad range of market niches. We can cite trading, KYC, general compliance, risk management and document management, and management of personal data. But as we know, look, it's a very crowded market, particularly in the UK. So there's a tremendous number of solutions providers that are competing for a small but growing pool of clients. Then just if we talk about the future, obviously our current situation is dominated by the COVID crisis, but it's really encouraging to see that RegTech is a sector that is remaining relatively resilient to the COVID-19 headwinds, and it really has tremendous potential. it's interesting for Australia in particular because RegTech translates into stability, reliability, tools for the management of risk, greater transparency for boards, and improvement in efficiency and productivity, and overall a better customer experience. So this really makes Australia a really attractive investment destination. With the pandemic, we will also probably see an increased number of opportunities in the sector, and this is due to the push for digitisation. We've got people working remotely from home, and there are new regulations that need to be met. It's also exciting times. As many of you will have remarked, the launch of the Australia-UK Free Trade Agreement negotiations kicked off last week. So this is really, really exciting because Australia will be seeking an ambitious and comprehensive free trade agreement with the UK. And this is an agreement that's going to drive increased trade in goods and services, two-way investment, economic growth and job creation. I think it's particularly interesting from the point of view of the services chapter of the FTA. This is where the RegTech sector shall hopefully benefit from this particular chapter. So, for example, an Australian company that's supplying into the UK will be covered by the services chapter, or likewise an Australian company that's supplying a service to a UK customer by establishing an office in the UK. We will be very interested to hear about any restrictions that RegTech companies are encountering, whether that's in terms of licensing or business structure. So we should keep that conversation going. Another interesting point is that RegTechs are heavily reliant on moving and processing data around, and this will also benefit from the digital trade chapter, which helps to make sure firms can move data to where they need it, subject, of course, to appropriate safeguards. And then finally, the FTA will build on existing rules around the movement of skilled professionals. So cross-border recruitment or overseas expansion should also be easier. So I think I'll stop there because we've got so many people speaking this morning, but I thought I'd just like to give you a bit of a taste for what Austrade is doing here in Europe and the assistance that we can provide either to investors or Australian exporters. And look, I'm really thrilled to be here this morning and interested to hear about some of the trends, opportunities and dynamics that we're discussing today. So thanks.
Thank you very much, Jennifer, and we'd welcome you to stay on the line if you'd like to hear the discussion. And I'm just really pleased we're able to get you in, and all the technology seemed to have lined up. So thank you so much, and we're looking forward to hearing Chris on the panel, which is coming up next. So thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
So now I'm going to hand over to Michelle East, who is going to be our moderator today, and she's going to help keep the panelists under control. I'm going to introduce Michelle, and then I'm going to ask her to introduce the panel one by one. So Michelle is the CEO and founder of Certainty Compliance, and she's the RegTech Association Advisory Committee member. She began her career in financial services at Perpetual Trustees and worked for Westpac Banking Corporation in a range of roles there, including dealing, product management, risk management. She was responsible for compliance, credit and operational risk frameworks, and then worked as head of strategy. Pivoting to her entrepreneurial life, Michelle founded a consultancy implementing risk and treasury systems for banks, a compliance licensing consultancy, and she's now combined her passion for compliance and technology as founder of Certainty Compliance. She was a foundation member of the RegTech Association, and she actively seeks out RegTech founders for collaboration and partnerships. And she believes in developing a strong ecosystem and corporate resilience. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Michelle, who is going to introduce our panel for today. Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks, Deborah, and welcome everybody to this part of today's program, which is part of the RegTech Open for Business series, where we try to unpack what's happening, the impacts on RegTech and the opportunities arising. To help me do that, I've got a brains trust, and I'd like to welcome onto our screens First of all, Chris Cobb from Austrade. I'm not sure we've got Chris on screen, but do we have him on voice?
Yes, you certainly do.
Fantastic. Chris is Investment Director at Austrade. He's based in London and the lead for the FinTech, RegTech and space sectors, including the really important UK-Australia FinTech Bridge and Space Bridge, as well as other agreements between Australia and UK governments, regulators and industries. And I've had the opportunity to be hosted by Chris in the Australian High Commission offices in London. We've also got Dr. Sian Lewin, who's a co-founder and head of client delivery at the RegTech Association. It's a London-based advisory that helps tech clients grow and scale their RegTech products, and regulated firms select solutions that meet their regulatory needs. Sian is also founder of RegTech Women, and her influence in RegTech has been recognised by Innovate Finance. She's on the Women in FinTech Power List, and we're really looking forward to hearing her insights today.
Thanks for such an introduction, Michelle.
I've fed some of the information today. We also have Richard Rosenholtz joining us from Stockholm. Richard must be one of the busiest people in Stockholm. He started a Stockholm RegTech meetup in 2017, which has at least 400 members. How many members now, Richard?
I think we have about 410 now.
410. On top of that, he's chair of the Nordic RegTech Association. He also has a day job. He's managing partner of Howard Compliance, working with his clients to operationally achieve long-term sustainable risk and compliance management through the use of new technology. We also have Deborah Young, who needs really no introduction to this audience.
Hi,
She's
everyone.
the founding CEO of the RegTech Association. Deborah has more than 20 years' experience in financial services, advocacy and engagement across technology. We really appreciate having her passion for building our community and helping us accelerate the deployment of technology. Deborah is a member of the federal government's FinTech Advisory Committee and was awarded the AFR 100 Women of Influence Award for Innovation.
Thanks, Michelle. We can't see you on camera. Have you got your camera on? Or I just can't see you?
I think I do.
Oh, there you are. Now, there you
I am?
are. All good.
Okay.
All good. We can see you. Yeah, great.
Okay. The RegTech Association was formed to be a centre of global RegTech excellence. And it's really pleasing as, one of the earlier members to see so many of our community online today. And I'm just going to list some of the countries we've got online. And if I miss your country, my apologies. But we have people from Austria, Australia, Finland, Hong Kong, India, Ireland, New Zealand, Singapore, Spain, Sweden, Turkey, United Arab Emirates, UK and the USA. So warm greetings to you all. And thank you particularly for the USA people for getting up so early in the morning. I'd like to invite you to all to participate in this discussion by posting your questions or indeed observations in the chat as we go along. At the end, we're going to have some time to go through those questions. And as Deborah said, if you can pop your name, company and country in there, we'll know where you're from. So 2020 is turning out to be really quite the year. We're almost halfway there through the year. So I'd just like to start with a really quick survey of what's happening in our various locations. So Chris, can I throw to you first? This was always going to be a challenging year for the UK. So how is the UK responding and what are the impacts on trade in 1 minute? Or less?
Wow, okay. Well, just for 5 seconds, sorry guys for not having the video today. We've all struggled sometimes with the tech and all the platforms we have to deal with, so that's my apologies for that. I mean, in terms of demand from our companies, the I would say it's not reduced, but the fact that COVID has stopped people traveling meant that some of the clients have struggled to implement their strategy quite as fast as they wanted. So the companies we've already mentioned and others probably on the call, they would love to have set up their businesses quicker and potentially have not been able to because of the travel restrictions. But in terms of the potential, we know that it's massive, and we know that we need to talk to a lot more people in the future. RegTech is a really interesting one for us alongside FinTech with the FinTech Bridge. And just a comment that the two case studies that Jennifer has already mentioned, they're actually chosen as part of the last year's cohort on the UK Australia FinTech Bridge anyway. So you can differentiate between FinTech and RegTech, but in this case, we regard them as being RegTech companies within the FinTech space.
Right. And Richard, really, Sweden had a really different response to COVID from other countries in Europe. What's happening?
Yeah, we've had more of an open border or an open society than most other countries, and I think everybody's heard about it. And it's created. I think it's creating a bit of a difference here in the Nordic region, rather than being very similar in Sweden, Norway, Finland, Denmark, and Iceland, who make up the Nordics. Sweden is now a bit of an isolated in terms of at least traveling. But at the same time, as we can see on today's webinar here, collaboration doesn't need the physical meeting. So I think a lot of the opportunities that people have been sitting on at home in the Nordics, we are a very innovative region of the world, looking at historically maybe manufacturing and such, but also now with technology and FinTech, we've accomplished a lot of things with a lot of unicorns. And I think that we are doing a lot more now. People are bringing up their ideas, they're developing their ideas a lot more, while the problems, the issues that needs to be solved and can be solved through RegTech is coming to its point now. So I think it's maybe not, I shouldn't use the word good and COVID-19 in the same sentence, but I think it's bringing a lot of good innovation and good opportunities here in the Nordics.
Mm-hmm. And Deborah, Australia's probably done a little better than expected on the health front. And while we've certainly, had taken a hit on the economic front, there are some positive signs. Are you seeing that confidence reflected here in Australia and among our members?
Yeah, I think so. And I think by and large, the RegTech cohort are actually a more mature range of businesses. So quite often we're put in the startup category. And whilst we do have some members that are early stage, many of our businesses are more mature, so probably have a healthier balance sheet. So they've been able to weather this storm a little bit better. And I think that there are two sides to the story. I think we've definitely had some anecdotal evidence of some POCs and trials and things like that may have been postponed because of COVID. But on the other side of that, we are seeing new deals being signed and lots of opportunities being explored. And we are seeing a ramp up of new memberships being signed with the association almost daily at the moment. What we are also seeing is because these tend to be small businesses, they're able to be nimble and to pivot very quickly. So they've been able to react very quickly to the environment that they're currently seeing and being able to pivot some of their products and services much more quickly than would normally probably be the case. So I think that, there's a real opportunity for us to take advantage, for everybody to take advantage of that right now. And, you know, in terms of scale-ups as well, they're very, very familiar and comfortable with working remotely, as many of them have been doing that anyway, even if they're in co-working spaces and things. They're kind of down with that. So they've been able to adapt to that, you know, to that, you know, new normal that we all have at the moment with working from home. So they've been able to adapt. And I think the other thing, just to what Richard was saying before, is that, you know, cross-border collaboration just got made easier, because the only thing that really gets in the way now is a time zone. Nobody's thinking anything of, you know, speaking to global customers. Everybody's just doing it online. So I think that there is a great opportunity now with much more global focus on what everybody is doing. And I think the other interesting thing that's come out of this is that governments and banks have proven that despite the fact that procurement is very slow, and that's what RegTechs would say is the biggest barrier, you know, look at how quickly the government have been able to procure things over the last 3 months. I mean, literally within days, weeks, new stuff was happening, and it was happening really super fast. So that gives me some courage on behalf of the market to think that when there's the will, there is definitely a way. And so I'm hoping that it's going to pave the way for accelerating adoption through faster procurement.
Have you seen that as well, Sian, with your clients that you're helping out? What's changed for them?
I think there's been quite a few changes, and as you know, we're only just slowly emerging from lockdown, so there's still a huge amount of uncertainty about when or if people will return to normal working in offices. I think the major thing we're seeing is actually the regulatory focus on operational resiliency has really focused financial institutions and other regulated firms' minds on their legacy technology, and then the need to obviously digitize, and we're seeing a huge acceleration in that. At the same time, I think we're seeing, unfortunately, an elongation of some of the procurement cycles and a postponement of spending money. And I think that's in anticipation of cost cutting that's likely to follow after the pandemic due to the economic downturn. I think the UK has been hit quite hard in terms of the economic impacts, and I think that will impact the buying behaviour of regulated institutions. On the other side, I think we are seeing a lot more interest and inquiries from those firms in terms of RegTech adoption, and hopefully that will be kind of a bow wave that's released once we come out of lockdown. That's certainly, I was talking to a CEO of a FinCrime company the other Friday, and he said they're seeing an uptick in inquiries. So it seems as if a lot of regulated firms are using this as an opportunity to do some planning and research and thinking about what their RegTech strategy might be in the future, because I think it's just highlighted that they can't continue as is with the lack of automation and manual processes that they're trying to manage in a remote working world.
Yeah, that's it's interesting that, out of quite a difficult time, there is opportunities for both sides. It's sort of the ability to stop almost for a moment and do some planning about how to build a better business going forward for regulated entities, and then also time for RegTechs to look at their products and also build their pipeline to have quite a healthy pipeline going into Q3 and Q4. I think is a positive outcome. Richard, what does it look like in the Nordics? And we all think about the Nordics as the same place, but is there a different speed or between the different countries that your members belong to?
Yeah, as I mentioned, I mean, we are different countries, and maybe a lot of people think we look the same because we're from the same region, but the approach to FinTech and to RegTech has been very different in terms of how the supportive governments have been. In Sweden, we have a challenge in that the mandate of the regulators are not to develop the financial services industry. It's simply to regulate and to monitor. Mm-hmm. While in both Norway and Finland, both Norway and Denmark, they have now set up government-funded sandboxes. They are supporting the hubs in respective countries, and that's creating a bit of a difference. But you look at the statistics. I mean, Sweden, in the Nordics, we have 6 large banks, which are maybe outsized even to the economies of the countries that they're operating in, and those banks have not felt the impact of the financial crisis in the same way in terms of regulations and the requirement or the need to operate differently. Some of them are now being pinched a little bit by regulators in terms of AML and KYC issues that they've had with their Baltic operations 10, 15 years ago. And I'm hoping that this will change the way that they look at RegTech. But just the development of RegTech, I mean, I think about 75% of the funding in the Nordics to FinTech and RegTech goes into Sweden. While we're only one of 5 countries in the Nordic region, and we're, I don't know, roughly estimated 30% or something of the population. But I think there's opportunities for RegTechs and entrepreneurs to now develop their ideas and do more with what we see during the pandemic here, and the challenges that I think, and Deborah, you said that there are RegTechs focusing on different industries and not just the financial industry coming on board on a daily basis in Australia. And I think, and I would very much like to see something like that here in the Nordics as well, because what we have, the 40, 50 RegTechs that we have in the Nordics are very focused on the financial industry. But like I said before, also, we have a very large manufacturing industry and building and construction and everything else around there, where there are opportunities for RegTechs, because you have regulations, you have data, and you can apply that through the new technology. And I would very much like to see something like that happening here in the Nordics.
Yeah, I mean, that's the opportunities for RegTechs are going forward. Actually, a nice segue into the next question I wanted to ask Chris. And I think you picked on a really important point there, that RegTech is not just about financial services. So, from Austrade and government's view, what are the plans to include RegTech in more mainstream support for Australia's export going forward, given that RegTech really is flexible, sector agnostic, and there are other applications other than in finance. So will our new free trade agreement offer other opportunities and incentives for RegTech?
Sure. I think maybe I can start off with that with a bit of a phrase here. So I mean, we don't know what we don't know, really. It's something. RegTech's a sector where we know a little about, but we don't know enough. And we have actually yesterday we were talking to Sian about this. That we'd love to do a bit of work around the sector and understand it better, understand the breadth of the sector across other verticals. I know FinTech fairly well, but again, I don't know everything in that sector either. So we need to talk to more companies. We need to talk to associations that were on the call today and understand what their needs are, what we can do. In terms of the FTA, that's very early days still. So Jennifer mentioned the services chapter, and that's being talked about at a very high level in government. So I think we can assume there will be a very interesting conversation between negotiators in that area. But we don't lead on that necessarily. So it's an area where we need to input companies and the industry's, requirements, needs, and see where we go.
That sounds like a job for Richard and Deborah.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
To go to. One of the things that we've seen in previous financial crisis is a rush to regulate to bring stability to markets. Your doctorate really explored how banks coped with the volume and speed of regulatory changes that came out of the GFC. Do you see that there will be the same kind of regulatory response to bring this crisis stability, or do you think there's a different opportunity here for regulators and RegTech in a different way from this crisis?
I think given that this crisis was more exogenous to the financial world than kind of caused within it, I think there will be a different type of regulatory response. And I'm really hoping that part of that response will be greater clarity around things like the use of cloud, I think, and more guidance around the use of cloud, and actually regulators getting comfortable with the use of cloud, because obviously in the current situation, having big data rooms with servers and on-premise technology is a real challenge when you're remote working. So hopefully there'll be more comfort around the cloud. I think where we are likely to see more regulation coming out is if we're starting to think about coming out and recovering in a more sustainable and green way. We're already starting to see the EU regulators bringing out a lot more regulation around ESG and sustainable finance, and hopefully that's a direction that will go in. I think the other comment I would make is that there was a lot of immediate response from the regulators to COVID-19 in terms of lessening or changing some of the rules in a crisis manner. And I think the speed at which that came out just gives a really important message to financial institutions that they need to be able to manage regulatory change much better using automated tools that track those alerts, make sure they're directed to the right place in the organisation. So even if we don't see the same type of regulation, I think we're unlikely to see huge pieces of reform, but I think we're likely to see minor changes, which are sometimes harder, I think, for regulated firms to deal with than big waves of change that you can turn into a big project and programme of work.
Yeah, that's an interesting insight about the changing nature of the way that, change is now going to be constant, but we have to be more nimble and resilient to implement that a little bit. A sort of a Dorothy Dix type question here for Deborah is, how critical is RegTech now to, really build recovery in our economies, national and globally?
I think it's going to be quite critical, because we talk about productivity and efficiency, and that's what RegTech can deliver. So that's got its role to play in economic recovery by making, providing people with tools to be able to do their jobs better and to do them smarter. For a start, I think that there's, and there's going to be some other drivers as well coming down the line in Australia shortly, because from the 1st of July we go into the new consumer data right regime with open banking, starts on the 1st of July. So I think that there's going to be opportunities for institutions to leverage from that. So there's all kinds of economic opportunity from there. Then, the next two verticals as cabs off the rank will be the energy industry and the telco industry. So I think that RegTech really has an important role to play in solving the challenges for all of those industry verticals. And if we can get this right and get this key message out there, that RegTech really can bring transparency, help businesses, boards, leadership teams make better business decisions by having the right information in front of them, will actually, help everybody to prosper. But we've still got a little bit of work to do.
We've also got a little bit of work to do on the question board here.
Excellent.
Before we wrap up, I'd just like to call to everybody, remind them a question for our panel. Something about UK, Australia, Nordics, RegTech more generally, trade, regulation. While people are putting their questions together, I'd just like all of you to sort of, one comment or one thing that, you would like to leave the audience with today. I think we've sort of got some themes emerging about recovery, resilience and innovation as the drivers of our economies forward. So could I maybe pass around the panel again, starting with Chris? One takeaway message.
Well, yeah, I think what I'd love to do is just to talk to more companies, to talk to more Aussie and UK. We have a team in the Nordics as well, in Stockholm. So we'd love to talk to you guys and hear about your stories, hear about the challenges, and see what we can do to help you develop in those markets.
Great. Sian?
I think the message, I think you meant, Deborah mentioned it earlier, that there are still some barriers to the adoption of RegTech. And I think part of that is still around educating the market in terms of the power of RegTech, what it can achieve, not to be scared of things like AI, because they're not going to replace jobs. They're just going to help you to be able to do your business better. So I think I would really like to see a kind of a collaborative effort to try and break down some of those barriers to the adoption of RegTech, because ultimately it's everyone is working towards keeping the financial system safe and sound and protecting consumers, and RegTech can really, really help in achieving that.
I don't think Deborah could have said that better.
There you go.
Richard.
I think one of a wish that I would like for everybody to take away is the use of technology, new technology, FinTech, or whether it's ordering food through an app to, online banking is an old way of doing things, but, all these new technological solutions, not within the RegTech industry, but, everything, new apps, new IT systems, new way of meeting through online meetings and all of this, that society is adapting and taking to the new normal. The approach of approving this and being open-minded to all this, I would very much like for society and decision makers and everybody's working at different companies to take with them to work and be able and open to using the RegTech products, to using cloud, to using AI, to using machine learning and all of this that we are maybe now doing in our personal lives. Could we do this in the professional life as well? Because that's, what I've seen a challenge before is that people have maybe been reluctant to this, or the rigid old system has not been willing to take a chance on new technology. But now that everybody's using it in their daily life, why not use it in work life?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good observation. Many of the technologies are no longer new, and and it is time to start using them to do the heavy lifting. We have a couple of questions, and gosh, one's a gnarly one. From Dashil, asking how we can leverage the latest technology to identify online suspicious activities, including monitoring the dark web. Do we have any cyber experts online?
No, but we will be running an event in a couple of weeks' time where we're going to look at a range of cybersecurity solutions. So Darshil might want to port in for that because we'll probably have at least 5 companies presenting on that.
Right.
I would just add that whilst they may not be looking for suspicious activities, there are now some financial crime kind of name screening companies that are doing deep searches of the web to identify kind of adverse information about potential bad actors to help in know your customer activities within financial institutions. So that's one use case I think that is about monitoring the dark web.
Right. Well, Darshil, come back to our next event in 2 weeks' time, and we'll get some more answer. James from Microsoft has asked about the trends we're seeing around offshore processing of back office roles in financial services organisations, particularly BPO centres effectively have failed to deliver. So anybody got a future looking ball to be able to see how this is going to play out? Will outsourcing of back office roles continue?
I don't have a view on that, but I just have some personal opinions on that in my various interactions during COVID with various very large companies, which are basically saying that they can't respond to the number of inquiries they're getting because they have shut down their offshore processing. So, that's going to have some kind of an advert that's having a trickle back effect to their ability to be able to deliver, services to their existing customer base. So people might start looking elsewhere, but that's not actually a RegTech. That's not a RegTech observation.
I have one observation, which is I think there is potentially a drive to, rather than outsource to low-cost locations which are using a lot of people, there is a drive to create more onshore managed services which are more automated, so using fewer people but more technologies in. So I can think of know your customer and client lifecycle management being a use case for that. We're seeing an interest in the UK, certainly in managed KYC services. So I don't know whether that answers your question, but I think there is some evidence that those large business processing outsourcing is potentially moving onshore, but the cost is still getting the economies of scale, but using automation rather than people.
Yeah, I think I have a similar feeling that a lot of outsourcing was done maybe in the past 10, 15 years, and especially in the Nordics, and not very far, but to the Baltic countries, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. And I think a lot of the new technologies, the new different star techs, whether it's wealth tech, FinTech, RegTech, or something like that, a lot of these are now going to maybe not backshore or onshore again the services, but rather using the technology, so it will be moved, once again, but this time into the cloud. So
yeah, this probably plays into another sort of question here from Jody from TCC around how AI and machine learning capability can be leveraged to analyze customers' behavior. And also, conduct as well. Really, I'd probably add on to that. We're sort of getting. Anybody want to? We've got another seminar coming up on.
We do.
Yes, we have one coming up, Jody.
Yes, it's this week. It's on.
It's this week.
Thursday,
is it Thursday?
actually.
Thursday.
Yeah.
Thursday, Jody, is the answer. Come back on Thursday.
Can I just also add, I think there's the UK regulator, the FCA, is very focused this year, I think, on vulnerable customers. So I think the ability to analyse consumers' behaviour, particularly in terms of how they're interacting with on mobile and desktop websites, I think, will be really important in helping to protect and manage those vulnerable customers. So I'm really interested in that and what solutions there are out there for that as well.
Yeah, well, we actually have some members are going to how we track. We've got 2 minutes. 2 minutes, Deborah.
Do you mind
Yes.
if I take that question there from Peter Oakes?
Yes.
So Peter Oakes, I could not agree with you more. I could not agree with you more. I feel very passionate about this. And if you want to go to our website, have a look at my submission to the Senate Select Committee that's been set up in Australia, where I suggested that a patient capital fund could actually be put together and it would be sourced from the regulatory fines to actually help build the capability and invest in RegTech companies that can stop the problems from happening in the first place. And it seems to me like a no-brainer. So I could not agree with you more. And it's something that we're still pushing for because the Senate committee has not delivered their final report yet, so it's something that we're still lobbying around the edges of, for sure, because RegTech needs patient capital. This isn't like an app that you can just download on your phone and it works from tomorrow. These are deep processes, very deep, and they take generally they take I think our research said about average of 13 months to get fully deployed. So I could not agree with you more, and we'll continue the good fight where that's concerned. Thanks for the question.
Yeah. Deborah, I think, we always like to finish on time. We've got 3 minutes, 2 questions and 1 final word from you. E-signatures, yes, regulators are getting out of the way. And bit by bit, we're seeing e-signatures adopted. And Carl, what a long question.
Carl, stay on the line. Stay on the
line, Carl. That's a good question.
Stay on the line. I think, first of all, I just want to acknowledge and thank everybody on the call today. And it feels like we only just get started before it's all over, but we do like to stick to time. But as we've been speaking, I have actually thought of some other things that we might be able to do to keep this connection that we have across the world alive. Institutions are recognising that they can't build everything themselves, and nor can they curate all of the solutions that are coming at them. And regulators are looking to technology to solve some of these challenges so that we can have a secure and trustworthy and fair system for everybody. And so collaboration with organisations like we've seen on the line today is absolutely going to be key. And I think as a connected global RegTech community, we've built these very authentic conversations over the last few months. I don't know whether anybody has noticed that, all of a sudden you beamed into somebody's lounge room or, their kitchen or wherever it is. And so you're having a very authentic conversation. And I'd love to think that as we're emerging out of COVID and actually having to deal with some of the economic impacts, that this authenticity around this conversation will carry us forward into this new way of interacting, working, and bringing our, resilience and flexibility to adapt to market conditions, really to carry that forward into, whatever is going to come next. So I would just say, let's try and keep the conversation alive. I've added 10 minutes onto the end of this where it will run over time, and so I'm going to stay on the line if people want to hang around for a chat. So first of all, thank you to all the speakers. Secondly, on this slide, you'll see some of the events that are coming up, and you can see some of what we've been talking about today. Thursday, we've got one that's going to be talking focused around people. And then we've got financial crime one coming up. We've got a cybersecurity one, speech and voice analytics, so on and so forth. And then our annual conference has been postponed and rescheduled for the 18th of March 2021, so you can mark your diaries. So Michelle East, thank you very much for stepping in. Oh, look, there's our wonderful map. 150 organisations are on there, and we've signed a couple of new ones the last couple of days. So I'm not sure if Kicker is on the line, but welcome to you. And we've signed another Big Four Australian bank that we should be announcing shortly as well. So it's filling out, which is great to see. So if you are not a member and would like to consider joining, please, there is the link, or, you know, hang about and I can take you through that. And as I said, we're going to stay online for another 10 minutes just in case anybody has any questions that they would like to have answered. So thanks very much for your time. If you've got to go now, completely understand, but I'm going to hang around for another 10 minutes. Thank you very much, everybody, and I'll call a close to proceedings. Thanks.